Hello YouTube, I'm back again with another video. I'm going to proceed with doing this deck profile as you see on your screen. Here it's on Dueling Book, and here you're allowed to be able to adjust and be able to revamp your deck and rearrange it however you see fit. But here I'm going to proceed and continue forward and show you what I have in this list. So starting off, we're playing 3 Ash Blossom Joy Spring. Not much to say, the card is clutch, and then it negates a card that whenever your opponent takes a card from their deck, puts it anywhere, whether it's in the graveyard, hand, or they special summon it, you discard the Ash Blossom to negate the effect. Incredible Ecclesia, the Virtuous is a must-have. You gotta play through this card because let me read its first effect. If your opponent controls more monsters than you do, you can special summon this card from your hand. And it has a quick effect during the main phase. You contribute it to special summon either Falnabas, which isn't necessary, but you're usually most likely going to your Swordsoul monsters, which I'm going to show you. The first one is Swordsoul of Moye. This one's very important why you play 3 of, because what happens if this card's a normal special summon, you can reveal one Swordsoul card or worm in your hand. Special summon one Swordsoul token that happens to be a water tuner monster that's level 4. And while you control that monster, you can't special summon monsters from the extra except synchro monsters. And if this card is sent to the graveyard as synchro material, you get to draw one card. So essentially, you get to draw more cards and have more consistency, along with the Virtuous. So instead of 2, we're playing 3 Tenyi because we want to see as many synchro monsters as possible, and I don't see it as a brick because it especially if you're going second, you can get multiple synchro summons against your opponent, and then you can manage to defend yourself against them. But let me explain how this card works. Basically, you banish the Swordsoul monster, or Swordsoul card, or War monster from your graveyard, and then you get special summon again a Swordsoul token, which happens to be a water level 4 tuner monster. But if this card's sent to the graveyard as synchro material, I'm not even sure if you're going to use it that often, but if most likely you're going to use it to send one of your Tenyi monsters. But what happens if it's sent to the grave as synchro material? You can send one Swordsoul card or one from your deck to the graveyard. And another card Swordsoul monster maxing out on is the Strategist. The Strategist, which happens to be Longyuan. It's a level 6 fire attribute worm monster. You can discard one other Swordsoul card or one other worm monster, special summon this card from your hand. Then you can special summon one Swordsoul token, which there's not really much to explain. And the last part, if this card's sent to the grave as synchro material, you can inflict 1200 points of damage to your opponent. And the reason why you got to max out on this card because you want Ezax to Baron de Fleur. You want to get more options when synchro summon. You want to be able to have access to level 10 synchro monsters that can also push your opponent and deal like some sort of collateral damage. And considering like just the summoning, just being able to summon this card isn't too difficult. So by giving up one of your worm cards or sorts of cards, this card makes it that it always helps because you want to beat your opponent as much as possible. You want to catch them by surprise, and being able to go into a level 10 synchro, it can devastate them because you're not only going to level 8, but it might have an effect that can put a lot of pressure on your opponent, as well as like it can also change the course of the game. And for our Tenyis, we're playing 2 Tenyi Spirit Adhara. Basically, I don't explain about their special summon effects. It's only if you control no effect monsters, you can special summon them from your hand. But if you control non-effect monster, you can banish this card from your graveyard. Give me a moment. You can target one of your banished worm monsters, except this card, to add it to your hand. Which really helps because like being able to cycle from your banish zone and being able to reuse their effects again, that's essentially like you're either creating more infinite loops with Adhara because that's why you're playing 2 or 3, but essentially you're being able to reuse their effects in grave and before you special summon them again. So The other one we're going to include is Tenyi Spirit Ashuna. Obviously, when you banish this card, which is why you're playing 3 of, you're supposed to summon one Tenyi monster from your deck except this card, but you cannot supposed to summon a monster for the rest of the turn except Worm. Although that's a hefty restriction, but it's important because you want to be able to get to the specific materials in order to sync or summon to a Worm monster. Either that Worm monster is going to draw you a card, that Worm monster is going to search you something from your deck, or it's going to be a blowout and just uh, remove cards from your field that you don't want to see, so which can be a problem for you. So you want to get rid of the problem cards as quickly as possible. A card that helps is Vishuddha. You can banish this card from your hand or graveyard, then target one card your opponent controls, return it to the hand. One thing I was really stupid, not to mention, it's also both, so whether it can also be from hand or graveyard. I was so stupid to not bring that up, but because I'm trying to get straight to the point, you guys get when I mean when I try to explain the effects. It's just to go. It's just to show you how useful they can be. But if I were to banish them, I would rather use them in my graveyard than from my hand, because just being able to summon them is very essential. Because not only you can potentially go into a link monster or a synchro monster that can help you, but you get an additional effect afterwards. So being able to special summon first and then get an additional effect after, I feel that's the best way to utilize their effects at their full potential, so that you can be able to like overwhelm your opponent and make a bigger comeback and be able to distribute more boards. And obviously for our spells, playing 3 droplet, it doesn't really hurt this deck at all, because a lot of times you have, by having more Worm monsters or cards that are like breaking your hand, you can always banish them, and sometimes, or you can have ways of retrieving them. But this deck, you want to ensure that you have monsters that can attack over them. You want to be able to deal as much damage, because this deck can actually go all out with this card. So Dark Ruler would be the best choice too. Would be great. Would be another option, but with this deck, because of Longwind's burn effect, you want to be able to utilize their burn abilities, so as well as their massive attack power, because you have ways of summoning into strong monsters who have hefty amount of attack, and helps you overcome those boards. You get more effects, and it could also lead to potential win. So that's why I'm playing for Bin Drop. Even though Dark Ruler, you don't have to use any, you don't have to like use any cost whatsoever. You don't have to get rid of, dispose of any cards in your hand or field. But for what it's worth, I feel that's where with this card you can like be able to like tutor out those cards in your grave and be able to not worry about the negative side effects of playing for Bin Droplet, because not only can they not respond to the monster effects, but you have some sort of way where you can at least have cards in your grave that you can utilize. But potentially, if you want to banish them, which you can, you can use that to your advantage and get rid of more cards, special summon more monsters, or retrieve more cards, basically. Because with this deck, we want to do as much damage as possible. So there's a reason why we're playing 3. And Dark Ruler could be is also another option, but I feel with Droplet, like with this deck, we want to get to our certain win condition. Obviously, we're just playing the 1 Monster Reborn, 2 Desires. You don't mind losing 10 cards, because this deck needs to get to its like I said, strategy as quickly as possible. And because we're playing a lot of 3-ofs that we want to see, it doesn't really put too much like it doesn't really put that much pressure on you. And this deck is very flexible, and consider how flexible it is. Though we have ways that we can like utilize our strategy and not worry about some of the pieces that might have been banished, because this deck has a lot of optimal like ways of trying to set up a proper board, and with the consistency that it has, like there's nothing really you fear like having to get rid of 10 cards to draw 2. So, but this deck needs to be able to reach its presence, to be able to reach its like field presence, to get to the certain cards that you need, but at the same time being able to get access to more extenders that can help you lead to like just, even if it's not the exact card, that one card that can do it for you. So I've been saying too much. We're going to 3 Swordsoul Emergence, allowing us to search for our Swordsoul monsters from our deck 10. But if we control a Synchro monster, we can just add 1 worm instead. But if this card's banished, you can target 1 Swordsoul monster or worm monster you control. You can increase or decrease the level by 1 till the end phase. Swordsoul Sacred Summit, you target 1 Swordsoul monster in your graveyard. Or if you control a Synchro monster, you can target 1 worm monster instead. But if this card's banished, same thing like Emergence. 3 talents, because we are already aware that our opponent's going to activate monster effects during our turn, whether it be maybe hand traps or negates. 1 upstart. This would have been better if this was pod size, but it's a semi-limited, so we're kind of forced to play the 1 upstart. But we need to draw as many cards as possible, and this is actually what this deck is built for. And for our traps, we're playing the 3 Imperm. You already know what it does. Basically a better effect Veiler, just being able to negate the cards. But if it's activated on a column where a spell trap card is held, where it's being faced towards this card, if that card's the spell trap is being faced towards this card, then cards in that column cannot be activated, and it's referring to only other spell trap cards in this card's column. So. And for our 1 trap, the Swordsoul Blackout, it's just a one of that you can search. You don't want to see too many because it can be essentially a brick, and it doesn't do anything going first turn. But it's a card that can just add more disruption just in case, because you can target 1 worm monster you control and 2 cards your opponent controls, destroy them. And if this card is banished, you can special summon 1 Swordsoul token, and there's not really much to explain. Does the same thing. Side decks up to personal preference. The extra deck, 1 Emancipator Horizon, because we're playing the Swordsoul Tenyi, so this card is able to use its effect at full potential, and because it requires a water monster in order for you to negate the activation of your opponent's spell trap card and destroy it. And then same with Baron de Fleur, but it doesn't require any specific monster. But we usually summon this guy usually summon her using Longuin, which is our level 6 non-tuner monster, the Fire Worm. But you're already aware how her effect works. Target 1 card on the field, destroy it. But once while this card's face up, it has a negate and destruction effect. So anytime they activate a card effect, you can negate the activation, and if you do, destroy this card. And once per turn during the standby phase, you can target 1 level 9 or lower monster in your graveyard, return this card back to extra, and if you do, special summon that monster. 2 Boxia. Reason being because this card helps us extend even further, and it has a very strong removal, because when this card is synchro summoned, you can target cards on the field up to the number of different original attributes of the worm monsters used for this card's synchro summon, shuffle them into the deck. And on top of that, you can target 1 card you control and 1 level 4 lower monster in your graveyard. Destroy that card, and if you do, special summon the other target from your graveyard. 1 Draco Berserker of the Tenyi. When your opponent activates a monster when your opponent activates a monster, unfortunately doesn't negate. You can banish it, and if this card destroys an effect monster by battle sends to the grave, this card gains attack equal to destroyed monster's original attack, and if you do, it can make a second attack on a monster during this battle phase. 1 Ice Jade Gamir Egrin. Obviously, you need to play Moye in order to synchro summon into her. But has a quick effect because you need some extra protection. You can activate this effect. Face up monsters you control cannot be destroyed or banished by your opponent's card effects this turn. Then if you activate this effect in response to your opponent's card or effect activation, and your opponent has a card with that name on their field and or graveyard, you can banish those cards. If a card is banished by your opponent's card effect while this card's in your graveyard, you can special summon this card, which I think is honestly great. So you can just you resummon this card, and you can be able to use this effect just in case they decide to do the same thing. But honestly, yeah, you definitely need this card. I'm sorry I don't see too many people playing this card in their build. So our other relentless synchro monster that we're playing is Psychic End Punisher. You have ways of accessing it, which is why we're playing Arhara, and in case we have our level 10s. But in the meantime, I'm going to read you the effect, and want to note that while your life points are less than or equal to your opponent's, the synchro summon card is unaffected by your opponent's activate effects. Once per turn, you can pay 1,000 life points, then target one monster you control, one card your opponent controls, banish them at the start of the battle phase. You can make this card gain attack equal to the difference in life points and your opponent's. So in the meantime, if you want to synchro summon this card, if you have a level 10, but you definitely don't want to dispose of your best level 10 synchro monsters, or if you have the exact level, whether they're synchro monsters or not, but getting this guy out is definitely worth having, honestly. Definitely worth the summoning conditions, definitely worth the materials, definitely worth the monsters that you're going to use on the field as sacrifice to be able to like get access to him. Because he's one of those cards that, again, can be a blowout card, because if you by reading, if your life points are less than or equal, this card's unaffected by your opponent's activated effects. On top of that, this card has 3,500 attack. So not only do you have a monster that's unaffected by card effects, depending on their differential of you and your opponent's life points, you have the potential to actually beat your opponent, win against your opponent with this card in that very turn. So let us proceed with the next card, because we have skipped down a lot of time. So I just want to be able to get ahead and be able to further explain more cards. So we're going to Ruddy Rose Dragon. Not really too much swing. It's already right in front of you guys. The card says for itself. If this card synchro summoned, you can match all cards from the opponent from the graveyards. That includes you. But if this card's used synchro summon, if you use Black Rose Dragon or Plant Synchro Monster as a material, you can destroy all the other cards on the field, which you're never gonna be able to resolve because there's no Plant Synchro Monster or Black Rose that you're using. But again, you're not going to utilize this effect. But the reason why we have this, in case you're up against Eldritch, or if they have a lot of problem cards in the graveyard that they can utilize, that they activate, that say that they might trigger or they might decide to activate during your turn and they cause some sort of disruption. You want to be able to get rid of all the disruption in the graveyard, as well as the quick effects that enable them to utilize those cards that can prevent you from actually going into your turn. So that's why we're playing the Ruddy Rose Dragon for that kind of situation. So obviously we're playing the 2 Jijiao Swordsoul Grandmaster. It's obvious as to why you're playing 2. There's no reason to play less than this card, because when it's synchro summoned, you can add to your hand or banish one Swordsoul card from your deck to your hand. But on top of that, it has a quick effect. You can banish one Swordsoul card or War Monster from your hand or graveyard, then target one other effect monster field, negate its effects until the end of this turn. But unfortunately, you can only use one of its effects. We're going into the Quicksand Longuian, the Swordsoul Sinister Sovereign. If you synchro summon another worm monster while this card's on the field, you draw one card. And if your opponent summons a monster, you can banish one of those monsters. If you do, inflict 1,200 points of direct damage to your opponent. When your opponent activates a spell drop card or effect, you banish that card. If you do, inflict 1,200 points to your opponent. And that's why we're not playing Dark Ruler, because of these effects. Subsequently, so by playing Dark Ruler, you won't be able to use this effect. And more often than not, we don't really summon this guy, but just in case, depending on the situation, if we have no other option, or there's no other level 10 synchro monsters that we can follow into, which is fall into this card. But case like even if it doesn't do anything that turn, but it just helps put that huge amount of pressure on your opponent, and you're allowed to draw a card. But like if I were to summon this guy, it would probably be near the end of the duel. So, and our second level 10 synchro monster happens to be Swordsoul Supreme Sovereign Cheng Ying. For each banished card, this card gains 100 attack and defense, and monsters your opponent controls lose that much as well. If this card would be destroyed by card effect, I wish it was destroyed by battle as well. You banish one card from your graveyard instead, and if a card is banished, you can banish one card each from both your opponent's field and graveyard. It is a hard once per turn. So even when you do manage to banish something, and whether it be from this card's effect or any of your other cards, um, whether it's on your turn, your opponent's turn, you can manage to get rid of two cards, one on your opponent's field, one in your graveyard, and that's exceptionally very useful because, again, I mentioned before, if there's a card that that will be a problem for you, or if they decide they want to activate it, whether it be from grave and field, you can get rid of those two cards, so you don't have to worry too much about them. And for our final link monsters, as well as 3 cards in next deck, 2 Monk of the Tenyi, uh, so that we have space to go into Shaman of the Tenyi. What happens again, you can discard one card, target one of your more monster graveyards, special summon it. For the rest of the turn, you cannot activate the effects of monster spells from the next deck, except Tenyi monsters, which is fortunate. But a lot of times, you just want to summon one of your war monsters. And being able to do that just really helps because you're retrieving the monsters. It's like another monster reborn. Um, you can be able to retaliate by doing so, and by playing this, especially when a lot of the war monsters that are in your extra deck as one of, you have a chance of reviving them with this card, and it's like you're playing extra copies of that card. But even though you got to discard one card, but a lot of times you have a chance to use this effect again in case whatever situation you may be in, that card may be able to be able to act on it and be able to cease the problem. So for you to have this card, it's always important to play as a one of, just in case whatever you're up against, and you have something engraved that can take care of the problem. That's the important part, is to retrieve that card and deal with it as soon as possible, so that for you can be able to contribute with your plays and be able to get through to it, so that whatever chances that may be, it leads to an easy victory. And again, anytime, I'm not even sure if you're not going to use this effect. I don't want to read to you guys, but it only applies if it happens to be a non-effect monster. But when you do target one card your opponent chose destroy, but more often than not, that's not going to really resolve, because what non-effect monster do you have that has enough attack that you're gonna use in order to bombard your opponent? But I feel like enough is being said. Again, I tried to give you an explanation to the deck profile, and I feel it was clear and concise. And I try to be able to describe and be reasonable as to my card choices and how I feel comfortable with it, and I do. But for you guys, if you have any if you have any disagreements, you can always feel free to comment based on your choice and how you would change this list. But based on my personal preference, I feel like this is the right way and how I should play the deck, because not everyone is going to share the same mentality or is going to have the same playstyle, because that may lead to a lot of confusion. So it's best to play based on your playstyle and enjoy the deck however you feel need, and just figure out how to strategize and how to be able to you play this deck the way it should be, and for you to not worry too much about misplays and figure out the solution and how you can defeat your opponent. Because again, I feel like there may not be a lot of options, but sometimes the card choices themselves are important as to how you build your deck. but it doesn't hurt to make some sort of change, because net decking, again, isn't always the best solution. It doesn't lead to the game being a lot more fun, but trying out different cards can lead to a lot of accomplishments, and for you to be proud of what you managed to build, and these, like, just the thought and the hard work in making something that you should be happy about, because if you succeed and the deck is capable enough, and it plays out how it's supposed to, and it doesn't have any issues, there's no any misconception or any confusion or any ways of misleading you into, like, there being problems and for you to make more adjustments. Check what cards that are you feel that make the deck not, I wouldn't say unplayable, but make the deck inconsistent, as well as, like, the best way to say it is, like, uncertain, and you want to have a certain playstyle for you to actually be able to follow through with your strategy and understand it, so that your opponent could be impressed and that you have other ways of actually winning with this deck. But I feel like I said enough, you guys. Again, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Be sure to check for more upcoming content later in the future. Be sure to check your notifications. Comment, like, subscribe. Thank you.